Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're diving into a really big topic for the UPSC psychology optional paper, motivation and emotion. And look, this isn't just abstract theory, right? This is the engine that drives pretty much everything we do. So nailing this stuff is super important for your exam. Let's get into it.
Just think about it for a second. What is that thing that pushes you through another late night of studying? And what makes somebody else wake up at the crack of dawn to climb a mountain? These questions, they get right to the very heart of what we're talking about today, those powerful, invisible forces of motivation and emotion. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to break down what motivation actually is. Then, we'll look at the huge difference between internal and external drivers. After that, we'll pivot to the body's reaction to emotion, explore a classic debate in psychology, and wrap up with why emotional competence is such a game changer.
All right, let's dive right in with the absolute fundamentals. When psychologists talk about motivation, what do they really, truly mean? Okay, so at its core, motivation is just the process that gets you started, keeps you going, and helps you finish something you've set out to do. And get this, the word itself comes from the Latin movere, which literally means to move. So it's what moves us to do, well, anything, from grabbing a glass of water to prepping for the civil services. This breaks it down really nicely into the two main buckets our drives fall into. Over on the left, you've got your biological motives. These are the ones we're born with, the survival stuff that's hardwired into us. Hunger, thirst, that kind of thing. And on the right, we've got the psychosocial motives. These are the ones we learn from the world around us. Think about your ambition, your need to belong. That's all shaped by our experiences in our society. Okay, now we're going to build on that and get into a concept that comes up on the UPSC exams all the time. The huge difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. This is such an important distinction to get. So on one hand, you have intrinsic motivation. That's when you do something just because you love it. The activity is its own reward. But on the other hand, you've got extrinsic motivation. That's studying to get a good rank or working hard to get a promotion. In that case, the reward is totally separate from what you're actually doing. And this leads to a classic psychological head scratcher, one that the UPSC loves to ask about. So picture a hobby you absolutely love. Now, what happens if someone starts paying you to do it? You'd think that would be great, right? But weirdly enough, a lot of research shows that adding an external reward can actually kill your internal passion for it. It kind of shifts your brain's focus from, I'm doing this because it's fun, to, I'm doing this for the money. All right, we're going to switch gears a little. We've talked about what drives us, but what about what we feel? How does your body physically create and respond to emotions? This is all about the science behind our feelings. This isn't just theory. The UPSC literally asked this in 2022. Think about it. When you feel scared, you don't just feel it in your head, right? Your heart starts pounding, maybe your palms get sweaty, your breathing gets faster. Those are the physical indicators. And yep, that's exactly what a polygraph or a lie detector is trying to pick up on. It measures the involuntary physical signs of stress that might show up when someone is being deceptive. So when we talk about experiencing an emotion, psychologists usually break it down into these three parts. First, there's the physiological arousal. That's your heart racing. Then there's the subjective feeling. That's you consciously noticing, whoa, my heart is racing. And finally, you have the cognitive interpretation. That's your brain putting a label on it, saying, okay, this is excitement, or this is fear. And this brings us to one of the biggest debates in psychology. It's kind of like a chicken and egg problem, but for feelings. What actually comes first, the physical reaction or the emotion itself? Let's say you're walking and you suddenly see a snake. Do you feel fear and that makes your heart start pounding? Or does your heart start pounding first and your brain goes, hey, my heart is pounding, I must be afraid? It's a fascinating question, and two major theories give us completely opposite answers. Okay, let's look at the two big theories here. First up, the James Lange theory. It argues that the stimulus, the snake, triggers a physical reaction, and then our brain interprets that reaction as an emotion. So you feel fear because your heart is racing. Now, the Cannon-Bard theory flips that around. It says the stimulus causes the physical reaction and the feeling of emotion to happen at the exact same time, but independently of each other. They're like two different alarms going off at once. So, just to really hammer this home, for James and Lange, the physical reaction is what causes the feeling. But for Cannon and Bard, the feeling and the physical reaction are just two separate things that happen together. It's a small difference in the sequence, but it has huge implications for how we understand our own emotions. Okay, so we've got all this theory about why we do things and why we feel things, but what do we actually
do with it? How does this help us in the real world? That brings us to our last section, emotional competence. And this isn't just some feel-good quote. This came straight from a UPSC exam question in 2022. It really underscores this idea that being able to understand and manage your emotions effectively can be even more crucial for success than just being book smart, especially when the pressure is on. So the big question is, how do you actually get better at this stuff? Well, here are 3 really practical strategies. First, self-monitoring. Just checking in with yourself. How am I feeling right now? Am I tired? Stressed? Just knowing is half the battle. Second, positive appraisal. This is about reframing. Instead of seeing a tough chapter as this huge, scary thing, you see it as a challenge you can totally handle. And third, self-modeling. Think back to a time you absolutely crushed a mock test. What did you do? How did you feel? Use that success as a mental blueprint for next time. These are skills you can actively build.
All right, that's a wrap for this deep dive. I'll leave you with a couple of questions to think about as you move forward. As you prep for your exams, what's really driving you? Is it that pure love of learning, or is it the end goal? And maybe more importantly, how are you going to actively use and manage your emotions, the stress, the excitement, all of it, to help you get where you want to go? Thanks so much for joining me.